Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Deep Dive. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives.
Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Today we're tackling a topic that's crucial for those prepping for the UPSC exams, but also fascinating for anyone curious about the world around us. Ecosystems.
It's a huge topic.
It is, but we've got a mountain of research and notes ready to go. And to help us navigate this complex world, we've got our resident expert here, ready to connect the dots.
I'm excited to dive in. It's amazing how everything's interconnected within an ecosystem. From the tiniest earthworm to the air we breathe, it's all connected.
That's what makes it so fascinating. But before we get lost in the details, let's start with the basics. What exactly is an ecosystem?
Right, because terms like environment, ecology, biosphere, habitat, those get thrown around a lot.
They do.
Yeah,
And sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they actually have distinct meanings.
exactly. So think of it like this. The environment is the stage where all the action happens. It's everything around us, the air, water, soil, even sunlight. Ecology, on the other hand, is the study of how all the players on that stage, the living organisms, how they interact with each other and their environment. It's like observing the choreography of this grand ecological dance.
I like that analogy. So
Mhm.
ecology is the study, the environment is the stage. What about biosphere and habitat? Where do those fit in?
Well, the biosphere is the biggest picture. It's the sum total of all ecosystems on Earth, the global stage where life exists.
Okay, so that's the broadest view.
Right. And then a habitat zooms in on a much smaller scale. It's the specific address of a particular species, the place where it lives.
So beehive for bees, coral reef for certain fish, those are habitats.
Exactly. But an ecosystem encompasses both the stage and the players. It's that dynamic interplay between a community of living things, all the plants and animals, and their non-living surroundings. It's like a bustling city with different neighborhoods and services, all depending on each other.
I see. So it's that interaction between the living and non-living that defines an ecosystem.
Exactly.
And speaking of living and non-living, our sources break down the components of an ecosystem into two main categories: abiotic and biotic factors. Abiotic meaning non-living, and biotic meaning living.
Right, so we're talking things like temperature, sunlight, water, and soil on the abiotic side, and all the plants and animals on the biotic side.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
It does, but the interesting part is how those abiotic factors actually shape life. For example, did you know that the availability of light in the ocean directly influences the types of algae that can grow at different depths? Red algae, for instance, can survive in deeper, darker waters because they've adapted to absorb blue light, which penetrates further down.
Wow, so the color of light actually determines which algae can survive where. That's incredible.
It is, and it makes me think about how different plants in my garden thrive in different conditions. Some love full sun, while others prefer the shade.
Right, so it's like those abiotic factors are setting the rules of the game, and the organisms have to adapt to play.
Exactly. And temperature's another great example. Some organisms, euthermal species, can handle a wide range of temperatures. Like those resilient squirrels you see darting around, they can tolerate both hot summers and cold winters. But other organisms, stenothermal species, they're much more sensitive to temperature changes.
So those are like specialists thriving only in specific environments. It's amazing how life finds a way to exist across such a variety of conditions. But how do they actually cope with these sometimes extreme environments? Our source material mentions some pretty fascinating strategies.
Yeah, each species has its own toolbox for survival. One of the most impressive tools is homeostasis, the ability to maintain a stable internal environment.
Right, regardless of what's happening outside.
Exactly. Mammals, including us humans, are masters of homeostasis. Think about how you sweat when it's hot or shiver when it's cold. Your body's working hard to regulate its temperature.
Like an internal thermostat.
Yeah,
But not every organism has that luxury, right?
you're right. Many organisms have evolved to simply conform to the external environment. They can't control their internal temperature or water balance the same way mammals can.
So they've developed other strategies for survival,
They have.
like migration, for example. Our source material mentions the journey of the Siberian crane, flying thousands of kilometers from Siberia to India to escape the harsh winters.
Migration is a remarkable adaptation. Those cranes, along with many other birds, insects, even some marine animals, they undertake these epic journeys.
It's incredible. But what about this other strategy? Suspension.
Ah, suspension. That's essentially hitting the pause button on life when conditions get too tough. Think about deciduous trees shedding their leaves in autumn, entering a state of dormancy to survive the winter.
Or bears hibernating, slowing down their metabolism to conserve energy during those long, cold months.
Exactly. It's like nature's power-saving mode.
Makes sense for organisms that can't regulate their internal environment as effectively.
Right. And there are other forms of suspension, too. Some desert animals estivate, which is like summer hibernation, to escape the scorching heat.
Wow, so many ways to cope. So we've seen how organisms adapt to survive.
Hmm.
But how do they actually obtain the energy they need to fuel all these amazing adaptations?
That's where the fascinating cycle of producers, consumers, and decomposers comes in.
Almost like nature's grand buffet.
Exactly. Producers are the chefs of this buffet. They're the ones who create the food from scratch, using energy from the sun.
Plants, algae, some bacteria, they're the master chefs, right?
Right.
Converting sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide into sugars through photosynthesis.
Exactly. They're the foundation of every food chain, the base upon which all other life depends.
So producers set the table, so to speak. Then come the diners, the consumers.
Right. Consumers can't make their own food. They have to get their energy by eating other organisms. We've got herbivores like deer and rabbits, who are the primary consumers, munching on plants.
And then there are the carnivores, like lions and wolves, the meat eaters. They're secondary or even tertiary consumers, depending on where they fit in the food chain.
Right. And of course, humans are somewhere in the mix too, often acting as both primary and secondary consumers.
We do love our diverse diets. But what about the cleanup crew, the ones who take care of all the leftovers? Our sources mention decomposers as a vital part of this cycle.
They are essential. Decomposers break down dead organisms and waste products, recycling nutrients back into the system. Fungi and bacteria, they're the master recyclers, releasing those valuable nutrients back into the soil for producers to use again.
So it's a continuous cycle. Energy flowing from the sun to producers, then to consumers, and finally back to the soil through decomposers.
It truly is a beautiful, intricate dance of life, constantly moving and evolving.
This is fascinating. But how exactly does this energy move through an ecosystem? Our sources mention something called trophic levels.
Right. Think of trophic levels like the floors of a building. Each floor represents a step in the food chain. The ground floor is occupied by the producers. Then, as you go up each floor, you encounter different types of consumers.
So it's like a pyramid, with each level representing a different feeding group.
Exactly. And that's where ecological pyramids come in. They visually represent these energy relationships.
So we have pyramids of numbers, which show the number of individuals at each level, pyramids of biomass, which show the total weight of living matter, and pyramids of energy, which show the amount of energy available at each level.
That's right.
I noticed the sources emphasize that the pyramid of energy is always upright. Why is that?
Because energy, unlike matter, can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. And as energy flows through each level of the pyramid, some of it is lost as heat. In fact, only about 10% of the energy from one level is transferred to the next.
That explains why it takes so much grain to feed livestock. A lot of that energy from the plants is lost as heat before it reaches the animals we eat. Speaking of food, our sources also mention food chains and food webs.
Oh, yeah.
What's the difference?
A food chain is like a simple recipe. It shows one straight path of energy flow, like saying grass is eaten by a rabbit, which is then eaten by a fox. But a food web is more complex. It shows the interconnectedness of multiple food chains within an ecosystem.
So a food web shows the bigger picture, how all those individual food chains intertwine.
Exactly. That complexity is important for ecosystem stability. If one food source becomes scarce, organisms in a food web have alternative options.
Like having a backup plan. But even with this resilience, ecosystems face threats, especially from pollution.
Absolutely. And our sources highlight two particularly concerning processes: bioaccumulation and biomagnification.
Those sound pretty serious.
They are. Bioaccumulation refers to the buildup of pollutants in an organism's tissues over time. Imagine a fish constantly swimming in water, contaminated with mercury. Over time, the mercury levels in its body increase.
So it's like a slow poison.
But biomagnification takes this a step further. It describes how the concentration of these pollutants increases as they move up the food chain.
So a small amount of pollution in the water can end up highly concentrated in the top predators.
Exactly. The classic example is DDT. It accumulated in the environment, was ingested by small organisms, and then magnified up the food chain, causing problems in birds like eagles and falcons.
That's a stark reminder of how interconnected everything is,
Hmm.
and how even small amounts of pollution can have huge consequences. This is incredible. We've covered so much ground already.
We have, from the basic building blocks of ecosystems to food webs and the reality of pollution.
It's mind-boggling, but there's still so much more to explore.
There is. Ecosystems are incredibly diverse, with a fascinating array of interactions and adaptations waiting to be discovered. Welcome back to our deep dive into ecosystems. Before we jumped into all those fascinating details about food webs and pollution, we were talking about the incredible diversity of ecosystems on our planet.
Right from lush rainforests to scorching deserts to the hidden depths of the ocean. It's mind-boggling to think about all the different types of life out there.
Absolutely. And to make sense of all that diversity, ecologists often group ecosystems into broader categories called biomes.
Biomes.
Yeah, think of them as large-scale ecosystems. They're characterized by distinct climate, vegetation, and animal life.
So it's like recognizing that a rainforest in Brazil faces similar challenges and opportunities as a rainforest in Southeast Asia, even though they're thousands of miles apart.
Exactly. They both have high rainfall, warm temperatures, and those iconic towering trees. And the same goes for other biomes like deserts, grasslands, or tundra.
So each biome has its own unique set of abiotic and biotic factors that shape the life within it.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. So understanding biomes helps us appreciate the variety of life on Earth. But it also reminds us that these biomes are interconnected, right? What happens in one can affect others across the globe.
You're absolutely right. Deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, for instance, not only impacts local biodiversity, but also contributes to climate change, which affects weather patterns and ecosystems worldwide.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all connected. But let's zoom in a bit and explore some specific examples of ecosystems, starting with one that's particularly relevant for UPSC aspirants forests.
Forests are incredible. They regulate climate, provide oxygen, conserve soil, and support a vast array of life. And as you mentioned, they're key in the UPSC syllabus, especially when it comes to understanding biodiversity, conservation, and environmental challenges.
Right. And India itself has an incredible diversity of forests, from the tropical rainforests of the Western Ghats to the temperate forests of the Himalayas.
Exactly. And within each forest type, there's even more variation. Think about the Western Ghats. It's a biodiversity hotspot. It's home to evergreen forests, moist deciduous forests, and even those unique shola forests found at higher elevations.
And then there are the mangrove forests, those ecosystems that thrive in the intertidal zones along coasts. They're like nature's nurseries, providing shelter for so many fish and crustaceans.
Mangroves are also incredibly important for coastal protection. They act as a buffer against storms and erosion.
They're truly remarkable, but sadly they're facing increasing threats from pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change.
That's true. And it underscores the need for conservation efforts and sustainable management to protect these valuable ecosystems.
Absolutely. But let's move on to another vital ecosystem that's often overlooked: grasslands. They might not have the towering trees of a rainforest, but they're incredibly important for grazing animals, carbon storage, and even water filtration.
You're right. Grasslands are often underestimated. Think about the vast savannas of Africa, home to animals like lions, elephants, and zebras. Or the prairies of North America, which were once teeming with bison.
These grasslands are also facing threats from overgrazing, agriculture, and habitat fragmentation.
They are. It's a reminder that we need to manage these ecosystems carefully.
Absolutely. Now let's dive into a completely different world: aquatic ecosystems.
Ah, yes.
They're so fascinating. From freshwater lakes and rivers to the vast expanse of the oceans, they play a crucial role in regulating climate, cycling nutrients, and providing food and livelihoods for billions of people.
And they're teeming with life, from microscopic plankton to giant whales.
It's amazing to think about all that life. Our sources highlight the importance of coral reefs, those underwater cities built by tiny animals called polyps.
Coral reefs are truly spectacular, but sadly they're facing multiple threats, from pollution and overfishing to ocean acidification caused by climate change.
It's heartbreaking to think about those vibrant ecosystems fading away. But we also can't forget about wetlands, those areas where water meets land.
Wetlands are so valuable. They act like sponges, filtering pollutants, absorbing floodwaters, and providing habitats.
Think about the Sundarbans, the largest mangrove forest in the world, shared between India and Bangladesh.
The Sundarbans are a perfect example of the importance of wetlands. They provide crucial habitat, protect against storms, and support local communities.
Wetlands are definitely unsung heroes, but they're often drained or converted for agriculture or development.
You're right. We need to do a better job of protecting them. But now, let's shift gears and explore those unique ecosystems found in extreme conditions, the places where life seems almost impossible.
Like those organisms that thrive in harsh environments. The extremophiles found in hot springs, deep-sea vents, or even glaciers.
It is mind-blowing to think about life existing in such extreme conditions.
It is. I remember reading about bacteria that thrive in the boiling hot springs of Yellowstone National Park. And then there are those creatures that live in the freezing waters beneath glaciers.
And those deep-sea creatures that survive in complete darkness and under immense pressure, they're like aliens living right here on Earth.
It's a reminder that life finds a way. And I imagine studying these extremophiles can provide valuable insights, maybe even help us understand the potential for life on other planets.
Absolutely. They offer a unique window into the resilience and adaptability of life. But let's bring our focus back to Earth for a moment and consider those areas where different ecosystems meet and blend together.
You're talking about ecotones, right? Those transition zones between two distinct ecosystems, like where a forest meets a grassland.
Exactly. Ecotones are fascinating because they often support a mix of species from both ecosystems, leading to high biodiversity.
And mangroves are a prime example, right? They're an ecotone between the land and the sea.
Mangroves are a perfect example. They're incredibly productive. But ecotones are also particularly vulnerable to environmental changes.
Right, because they're influenced by the conditions of both adjoining ecosystems.
You're exactly right. But ecotones also highlight the importance of understanding how different ecosystems are interconnected. We can't manage them in isolation. We need to consider the broader landscape.
It's all about seeing the bigger picture. Speaking of the bigger picture, our sources also delve into ecological niches.
Ah, yes, ecological niches. A niche describes the role an organism plays in its ecosystem. It's like an organism's profession, its unique contribution.
So it's not just about where an organism lives, but what it does, how it interacts, and how it utilizes resources.
Exactly. For example, a woodpecker's niche involves drilling into trees to find insects. It's providing a valuable service by controlling insect populations.
And bees are pollinators. They're vital for plant reproduction. It's amazing to think about all the different roles organisms play.
It is, and it's important to remember that no two species can occupy exactly the same niche.
Right, otherwise they'd be in direct competition.
Exactly, and that's why understanding ecological niches is so important for conservation. If we lose one species, it can disrupt the entire ecosystem. Each species contributes something unique.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening. We've explored the diversity of life on Earth, from rainforests to oceans, and we've delved into the complex interactions that make these systems work.
It's been a whirlwind tour. It's a testament to the interconnectedness of all life and the importance of understanding and protecting these valuable ecosystems.
We've covered so much ground, but our journey isn't over yet. We've explored the wonders of ecosystems, but now it's time to face a more challenging reality.
Indeed. The ecosystems we've been discussing are facing a multitude of threats, and many of them are driven by human activities.
All right, well, we'll take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll delve into these challenges and explore what we can do to protect these vital life support systems. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on this incredible journey exploring the intricate world of ecosystems.
We've seen how they work, from their basic building blocks to the complex relationships that connect everything.
We've marveled at the diversity of life on Earth, from those lush rainforests to the vast oceans.
Even those extreme environments where life finds a way.
But now, it's time to shift our focus.
To a more challenging reality.
The threats that ecosystems are facing in a rapidly changing world.
And many of those threats, unfortunately, are driven by us, by human activities.
So let's dive into those challenges.
Let's.
And I think a good place to start is with the one that's on everyone's mind. Climate change.
It's a big one. Climate change is like a ripple effect, impacting ecosystems in countless ways. It's altering temperature and precipitation patterns.
Leading to shifts in plant and animal distribution.
Exactly. It's also disrupting seasonal cycles.
And increasing those extreme weather events.
We're throwing a wrench in the gears of these finely tuned systems.
It's a good way to put it. Think about those vibrant coral reefs we discussed earlier.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. Rising ocean temperatures are causing coral bleaching, leading to those widespread die-offs.
And ocean acidification, which is another consequence of climate change.
Right. All that increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is making it harder for corals and other marine organisms to build their shells and skeletons.
So they're essentially dissolving, and it's not just the oceans feeling the heat.
You're right. Forests, Those vital regulators of our climate, they're also on the front lines. Increased temperatures and droughts are making them more susceptible to wildfires.
Which release massive amounts of carbon dioxide, BEA, into the atmosphere, making the problem even worse.
It's a vicious cycle, and grasslands are facing their own set of challenges.
How so?
Well, changing rainfall patterns are altering the composition of plant communities, impacting grazing animals, and increasing the risk of desertification.
And the wetlands we discussed, those crucial buffers against floods and droughts.
They're under threat, too. Sea level rise is inundating coastal wetlands, and altered precipitation patterns are affecting inland wetlands.
So we're losing biodiversity and the vital services they provide. It seems like climate change is this major threat multiplier, amplifying existing pressures on ecosystems.
You've hit the nail on the head. But it's not the only challenge. Our sources also highlight a whole range of human activities that are directly impacting ecosystems.
Like habitat destruction. That's a major driver of biodiversity loss.
Absolutely. When we destroy habitats, we're essentially evicting countless species from their homes, pushing them closer to extinction.
It's like tearing pages out of the book of life.
That's a powerful image. Deforestation for agriculture, logging, urban development, it's all fragmenting and destroying those habitats.
Disrupting processes that have evolved over millennia. And it's not just forests being impacted.
Yeah.
Wetlands are being drained, grasslands are being converted to croplands, coastal areas are being developed.
It's happening everywhere. It's a global problem with consequences for all of us.
We can't forget about pollution either. We
Yeah.
talked about bioaccumulation and biomagnification, but there are other forms of pollution impacting ecosystems.
Right. Industrial waste, agricultural runoff, plastic pollution, all of that is contaminating water, soil, and air.
It's like we're slowly poisoning our planet.
And then there's the overexploitation of resources.
Overfishing, overhunting, unsustainable logging, all examples of taking more than nature can replenish.
Exactly. Like constantly withdrawing from a bank account without making any deposits.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's going to run dry.
And what about invasive species?
Oh, they're a huge problem. They can completely disrupt ecosystems.
So these are species that are introduced to new areas, often accidentally, and then they spread rapidly.
Exactly. They outcompete native species, alter habitats, spread diseases. They can even drive native species to extinction.
It's like they're ecological bullies.
A great way to put it. It all boils down to the interconnectedness of ecosystems.
So we're facing climate change, habitat destruction, pollution, overexploitation of resources, and invasive species. It's a lot.
It can feel overwhelming, but it's important to remember that we're not powerless. We can make a difference.
Okay, so where do we start? What can we do?
Well, our sources emphasize conservation efforts, both locally and globally. That means protecting existing habitats by establishing protected areas.
Like national parks and wildlife sanctuaries.
Exactly. But it's not just about setting aside land. We need to manage those areas effectively, controlling those invasive species, managing fires, and regulating human activities within them. We also need to focus on restoring degraded ecosystems.
So giving nature a helping hand.
Yes. Restoring forests, wetlands, grasslands. It can help recover biodiversity, sequester carbon, improve water quality. But we also need to address the root causes of these challenges.
By adopting sustainable practices.
Exactly. In all sectors, agriculture, forestry, fishing, it's about making choices that benefit both people and the planet.
And of course, tackling climate change is crucial.
Absolutely paramount. Transitioning to renewable energy sources, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, promoting energy efficiency, those are all essential.
It's a global effort, but individual actions matter too.
They absolutely do. We can all make choices to reduce our impact. Conserve water and energy, reduce consumption, choose sustainable products, support organizations working to protect the environment.
It's about recognizing that even small changes can add up.
They really can. And we can also advocate for policies that protect ecosystems, support those sustainable practices, and address climate change.
Raising our voices and demanding action from our leaders.
Yes. And finally, learning more about ecosystems. Sharing that knowledge with others.
It all comes back to understanding. The more we know about these vital systems, the more likely we are to protect them.
Exactly. This deep dive has been a journey. We've explored the wonders and the challenges.
We've seen how our actions are putting pressure on those systems, but we've also learned about solutions.
It's a call to action, a reminder that the future depends on protecting these incredible ecosystems.
So let's keep learning, exploring, and advocating for a world where ecosystems thrive.
For a healthy and sustainable future for all.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.